Running Sentences presents The Murderous Yacht, Part 3. Clues and Chaos. The more they investigate, the more it feels like this group thinks they're being set up. However, dealing with this robot comes first. This is a work of fiction. Any names, characters, businesses, events, and situations within this story are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real, fictional characters, creatures, events, incidences, and situations is purely coincidental. Story is written and narrated by Michael Honore. Copyright 2023, Michael Honore. All rights reserved. Frozen in place, the group could only watch as the big robot figure approached them. Each of them were elbowing one another to get them to do something. This resulted in nothing happening other than an increase of elbows being thrown about at one another. What do you want? The robot slowed at the sound of Bouquet's voice, although it was almost upon them.
That didn't do much. I say we all run for it. There isn't enough time for that. There is for me.
Blur morphed his shape into a puddle and began moving rapidly along the floor. He made it just about a few feet in front of the robot, who lifted a foot, then stamped down on the gooey shape. All forward momentum of Blur's came to a stop as he did that.
Owie, owie, owie.
You are trespassing.
No, we are not. We are here by invitation of your former, or maybe still living owner, Ebenezer Slither.
What is your purpose here?
We're solving puzzles, apparently, at the request of said owner, right, Bouquet? And anybody else want to chime in? Yes, we think one is going to be in the engine room. A puzzle, I mean.
There was a cock of the head of the robot as it computed something before it looked at them again. Do you have an answer to that riddle?
Maybe. Can you let me up first, though?
The robot lifted its foot and took a few steps back so he couldn't go forward. Blur took a moment to pop his head up so that he could see whether or not he could go forward, and then just popped back into a normal-esque blob shape and began dusting himself off.
Thank you. Now, we must confer before we give you an answer. Please give us a moment, if you will.
Blur turned to his compatriots as they all huddled together for this moment, a look of expectation crossing all of them as they looked to one another. No one was saying anything now. A couple of moments passed as they all just stared.
Anyone got anything?
As the silence broke, they all babbled a bit, saying things without thinking much. There was noise that carried on for a few seconds before they managed to stop themselves.
The puzzle. Right, left, and center. Which one is the wrong direction?
Don't forget the machines, the aliens, and the robots in all of this, Mr. Blur. Blur glared at Cobra for bringing it up since he figured it was all rather implied, but he nodded.
Yes, that bit too.
Machines can't move, so that strikes them out.
Why can't they, Scrape?
All eyes turned to Scrape, who had said that. I figured it was given that the machines meant things like engines. They move, but mostly internally, right? That leaves us with two creatures moving in a direction.
I agree with Scrape, but since it is so obvious, isn't it too soon to cut and run with that theory? It might be the answer we're looking for, since our minds tell us that it doesn't exactly line up. It's something to be suspicious of, right?
There was a bit of a staring contest between Bouquet and Scrape, as they both tried to forward their theory and silently contest their points. It went nowhere, since there was no communication going on. Your answer, please, or I shall be forced to remove you from the ship. Where would you put us, robot golem figure? Out the nearest hatchway to space. Cobra looked back at her associate, shaking her head at that answer. So, anybody? An answer? The humans are going the wrong way. The trio looked at him stumped. Look at the situation we find ourselves in right now. We have a robot stopping us, the machine's going on in its set path, and we are trying to go forward, but we can't. Bouquet shrugged, and then turned to the bot. We are headed to the wrong direction. Where will you go, then? There was a quick look back at the group as she turned back to them with an what the fuck expression. We will go back? Then you should do that. The first to turn around was Scrape, who promptly slapped his hand to his face. Oh, look, an engine room we missed it the first time through, because we didn't look behind us. What great detectives we all are. When they all turned, there were more than a few pained expressions, but they all moved along towards that door. The feeling of not saying anything ran through them as the best choice, since Scrape had basically said what they all thought. The hum and clank of engine parts greeted them as they passed the door into the engine room. Here there was quite a bit going on, with robots hurrying between two long glowing blue tubes. Both were spinning at high speeds, sending a liquid substance up a tube that disappeared into the ceiling. So what are we doing here? I don't know, Cobra. The clue said we needed to be here, didn't it? No, it didn't. It only said machines, robots, or aliens, or humans, or whatever. Not a particular room. Why did we come here, then? As Bouquet said this, they were watching the wordless work of the robots, who kept tending to tubes and engines. It appeared that the engines had something going on with them, since there was this constant work. It's the one thing we thought of that potentially had robots, and here they are, along with machines. But, we should have chosen the kitchen. It would have made more sense. Oh, shut up, Cobra. Everything is here before us, isn't it? And we were told we were going in the wrong direction. We turn around, then? Maybe, Blur? The machines are, I guess, crowded to the left, with the robots looking on to the right, and that leaves us once again. The stare at the machines and bots told them one by one to begin turning around. After all, the puzzle had been solved, hadn't it? Just needed to turn around, and they were headed in the wrong direction. They already knew this. Another door, this one that doesn't have a sign over it, declaring what it is. Shall we go to see what that one leads us to? There was a door not far against the back wall, not far from the door that they had come through. Before they could really think much about it, Bouquet had hurried over to the door they'd come through. It opened with the usual amount of zip, and the robot from before filling in the doorway beyond. She stepped back, and the door closed. Well, I think we don't really have a choice, do we? Other door? There were nods of agreement to Bouquet, and they all went to the door on the right side of the room. An office was behind door number 2 that looked eerily like the one upstairs. This one, though, seemed to be much more well-furnished and a bit, actually quite a lot, smaller. There were in fact some filing cabinets here as well as paperwork on the desk in the center of the room. Another door leading out and the back of this office space. Sitting in the chair behind the desk, though, was the head of Ebenezer, blinking away. Scrape, who was the first in, saw this as he was getting ready to explore a bit around the room and recoiled in horror. Head! What do you mean? The head of the guy is here, and it's alive, a bit, maybe? Are you alive? I don't know, Cobra. Yes and no to being alive. Cobra and Blur scrambled into the room to see what was being pointed out. They stopped and stared at the sight and sounds before them. On the other hand, Bouquet, who had come into the room, poked her head out to see if the robot was coming. He had, and was moving towards this door.
"What does that mean, Mr. Ebenezer?"
"I'm merely here to move you along. Your next clue to the greater puzzle of getting out of this mess is here. Another office and more numbers await you. One is here, the other is to be found. You only have a few minutes." The head that was in the chair then vanished. The four shared a look, as Bouquet had joined them again, and they all looked off towards separate spots in the room to look.
"What are we looking for? By the way, I think that robot might be soon coming in here, so we really don't have time. Anything look out of place?"
Books and files began flying towards the center of the room as they were pulled from their location. No one was answering, and a quick glance over them. Each was taking a quick glance over at whatever they could find, and then discarding them for something new.
"What would be out of place, Blur?"
"Another puzzle of some sort, Bouquet."
"But that could be anything, Cobra."
More files, and even a piece of artwork, joined the growing pile of junk in the center area of the room, near the desk. Some of it had reached it and piled onto it. Most of it was around the legs, body of the desk. There was a rumble that shook the floor a bit, telling them that the robot was closing in at an extremely slow pace. It did not appear to be afraid of them escaping this place, and so they kept working away.
"Are we sure that it is in this room? The puzzle that was given to us was rather unclear, like all the ones we've come across so far."
"No, but look until we have to run away. It's our job to turn over every object in the search for truth, right?" Scrape moved towards the center of the room, pushing stuff off the top of the desk so that he could search what was ever left there. A couple of books looked good, and he held onto those as the doors they'd come in opened, revealing the robot. They all looked over, and in a hurried step, they all ran towards the back of the room where the other door was. Out they came into the hallway that they'd been in not too long ago. The elevator had dropped them off here, and so they decided to keep moving. Scrape was handing off the few books he'd grabbed as they kept moving. Their aim was for the far elevator that would get them back to the ballroom. The robot was now moving much quicker with heavy steps behind them, closing in as they hurried their way towards this elevator. With the elevator firmly in view, they stumbled aboard. The ballroom was a welcome sight for the group, sweaty and tired from their sudden sprint. They did not stop until they got into the center of the room and turned to look at where the elevator had been. It had disappeared into the wall, and nothing appeared as time was ticking by.
"What do we do now?"
"Well, Cobra, why don't we find that third office we were told about, or you guys were told about? I barely heard third office or something. Or did it mean we go back to the other floor above us, to the first office we came into?"
"Well, I think we should check the books out I found first."
An evil glare came off of Bouquet as they decided to settle on looking over these books. 2 were quickly discarded, followed by the third. The fourth remained in the hands of Bouquet, who was skimming over lines in a rapid pace. She then looked up at their expectant faces and then back down at the book. "Give me a moment to look, please."
"Take your time. It isn't like we're being rushed at the moment."
"Why are we rushing again?"
Well, Ebenezer probably called the cops, Cobra. Why, though, is beyond me. If you want us to solve your murder or prove that we could, shouldn't you give us a fair amount of time to do it in? This is probably all a game to him, and he isn't dead, probably. You know how bored rich people can be."
"No, Blur, I can't say that I do. I work on the streets, not with rich people, since they always seem to create drama. You took this job, though."
"Forced into it, Cobra, forced into it."
"And what do you mean by that?" Scrape went through a variety of expressions on his face, trying to find the right words for what had happened to him. "I was told I couldn't refuse to do things because they knew things about me. Plus, they paid some money up front. Any of you go through something similar, or was your offers all personalized?" To this, Blur and Cobra shook their heads no. On the other hand, Bouquet was raising her hand as she was reading. I did go through something like that. They threatened you? Sort of, Blur. A promise of keeping things quiet should I be willing to come along for the ride. I did not get promised extra money, though. She continued her study of the book before coming to a stop at a page. What deals were offered to you if it wasn't threats that brought you two here, Cobra and Blur? It better have been something amazing, since all this madness hardly seems worth it. Fame and fortune if I showed up and helped out. It was never said exactly what the thing was, but the offer was a good one, so I can't exactly pass up a chance with the way my life is going. All attention then shifted to Blur, since he was now the lone holdout for answering the question. I don't see why this is important to what we are doing. It helps show us that you aren't one of the killers, okay, Blur? Well, I'm not sure how you got to that point, but fine. I was sent a letter, an actual invitation to the ship. It did not say why, but said my presence and knowledge were needed at once, so here I am. Now, with all of that out of the way, I might actually have a clue, potentially. The three others moved in a heartbeat crowd around Bouquet as she showed the book to them. We must go to the unexplored. Our answers equal a door we've seen, but it vanished before us. The dining room. There was a noise of a crash that came from the area where the elevator had dropped them off. The robot from before emerged from the shaft where the elevator should be, however, it was no longer there. Not a single word was said as the group sprinted towards the dining room, mostly slipping and sliding their way to that door. The space was similar to how they'd left after dinner. Clean and well taken care of. It had a shine to it that would make most people jealous, for they would never have something this nice looking. This little group, though, wasted no time on that as they rushed towards the back of the room, behind where Ebenezer had sat in his chair. Three of them went to the wall looking for any seams or ways to get the door open that had delivered them their dinner. Scrape, though, stopped at the chair the man of mystery had sat on to make sure his head didn't appear there. He sighed in relief when he saw that it was empty, and began helping the search, finding a way through that door. Find anything that looks like a switch and press it. Don't do that. That'll lead us somewhere bad, Cobra. Why? If we don't do that, we will wind up in the grasp of a robot who seems to want to crush us or push us out of a safety lock. What if it resets us back to the beginning of all of this? They all stopped for a moment to consider this, but then hurriedly carried on. There could be a worse fate than that, and well, there was a robot that was ever so slowly and speedily and then slowly again, chasing them, oddly enough. A few questions entered their mind as to why it was so slow and then speedy and then slow again, but again, escaping sounded better than being crushed or pushed out of airlocks or whatever else the robot had plans for. With a click, a piece of the wall slid away under Cobra's grasp. Got it! None of them waited as they poured into this new opening for a doorway. The smells and steams that occupied this room were a welcome change in environment. It was almost calming as they stumbled into the busy kitchen space. A humanoid cook was busy, making some sort of food and moving about as the spacious space. In order to do so, the foursome came to a stop just inside the space, staring before Bouquet pushed them further in. Robot, remember? They went in further as the cook turned to them to see who was disturbing his space. Oh, the guests, welcome. What brings you here? Looking for a third floor, maybe? Also, are you the only other alien in here aside from us? And, there is also a robot chasing us since we are investigating things? The cook merely nodded along as if this all sounded good and right to them.
Oh, that's one of Ebenezer's pets. No big deal, don't worry about it. Oh yes, and your boss, Mr. Ebenezer, may be dead. This news from Cobra caught the worker off guard, and his cheery face faded to a frown. Oh no. But we are trying to solve who did it, and unfortunately, so far, all of our suspicion falls between you and the robot. Oh no. Yes, but maybe it's not you, but maybe it is. What are you cooking, by the way? Oh, the master told me to have a meal ready for his guests, as they would probably have a lot of running around to do. And so that's what I've been doing. The robotic clank of a robot announced it had arrived, and it was now in the doorway as it was pushing its large frame into the kitchen. The cook, though, seemed rather calm, and held up some sort of remote towards it. The robotic figure was concentrating more on the guest, though, than paying attention to the cook. Robot, what are you doing? These aliens have entered the ship and are wrecking it. They are guests. They are a menace trying to solve puzzles where no puzzles exist. I fear they are assassins. We have been warned about them. You know that Ebenezer was having guests over, with the permission to explore the vessel. No more of this wanting to crush them or push them out of some place, or whatever it is you are planning on. I don't know what you are planning on. What is it you are planning to do? They're causing mayhem. Having had enough of this, the cook, who had been pointing the remote at the robot, began fiddling with it, and then made sure to point it at the figure and clicked a button, which caused the creature to slump over and turn off. There, that is much better. Sometimes he never knows when to shut up or what to do. The room was suddenly plunged into darkness. This was followed by the sound of a gunshot, and then another, echoing through the room. It went quiet as the light came back on, and the chef stumbled about, struck twice. Really? This is happening again? And in front of us? The chef then fell over with a gasp of pain, landing on the floor with a heavy thud. Bouquet was the first over to him, but she was quickly joined by the others. Oh, what a life. Are you dying, sir? Pretty sure I am, yes. Then you must tell us how to get to the third floor. With a weak, trembling arm, the cook pointed a long finger towards the back of the kitchen. Over there, and do take your time to grab the food I've prepared. I think you'll need it. A glance toward there showed them that there was a small doorway in that direction. A grunt and a groan drew them back to the chef, who had died in this brief, short interlude. There was a moment of silence from the detectives as they all did stare downward. This, though, was then interrupted by the sound of something charging up. Cobra looked over towards the robot with a grimace on her face. I think at this moment, following the chef's advice might be a good idea. Food and run. No one questioned this as they grabbed the plates of food and some utensils, if they needed them, and began to move. Their hurried walk and eat led them to a door not far away. It was a small door, one that made them lean over and crawl so that they could get through it. One by one they popped into a dark room with no signs of where they might go. The door didn't shut, which was good since it was providing some light into this room, but the light that did come in, however, died out 2 feet away from its opening. So what do we do now? I'm guessing that, Cobra, you saw the robot coming to life, which is why you told us to move? Yeah. Then we keep moving and question things as we go, like, who would want to murder a chef? One of us, probably, Mr. Scrape, and I think it might be on to you. There was no response to Blur's comment, as they'd begun to move, bumping into one another along the way. They were moving at some sort of pace down this dark, twisted hallway that went upwards and to a right and to the left and to the right and straight and then
and just everywhere it wanted to go. The going was a bit slow as they bumped and ran their way, as best they could, until they came to a hard stop, with nowhere further to go beyond this. Bouquet, who had been in the lead, felt her hands about the place, but couldn't find a path or handle of any kind in front of her. This is a dead end. This was the only way to go, though. How would you know that, Scrape? Well, Cobra, I felt for as many other ways aside from the ceiling and made a rough guess as I was running along. Arguing isn't going to do anything for us at the moment. Think and feel for stuff around us. See if we can find anything else. There were a few thuds from feet kicking at the walls around them, as well as a few hands hitting at the walls. Things stayed the same until a sudden creak of noise announced its presence. Then a bunch of light began flooding in the form of front of them. I hope this is the floor of the secret office. They charged forward without any regard, as the wall in front of them now began opening. As Bouquet had suspected, an office greeted them once they'd stepped inside it. A cozy, tight space with little room for the group. Even with the variety of sizes and differences between the four of them, it was a tight space. The desk was the normal one that barely had enough room for it before running into the far wall. What are we searching for in here? Anything at all? Yeah, I think so, Blur. That's what we're doing wherever we go in this mad ship, so yeah, unless you have a better idea, Blur. Bouquet and Cobra were already moving to the right side of the room to look at that wall and what cabinets were built into it. We probably don't have much time to do this, so stop talking, you two. Are we sure that robot is chasing after us? I didn't really get a good line of it, and it didn't sound like it to me, did it? Well, Bouquet, it is better to assume than to be caught by it, so just assume that it's after us. Blur and Scrape had joined in, going to the left wall where there were no cabinets. Instead, it had a few paintings, which were all at odd angles. Well, this feels like an amusement park madhouse. What, because we keep running from place to place only to be spooked and have to run some more? A bit, yes, Blur, a bit. No more complaints, just search for something. The urgent cry from Bouquet made them all look a bit harder. Blur and Scrape were twisting paintings about, with several of them coming off in their hands. On Cobra and Bouquet's side, they'd opened all the cabinet drawers to look through them, but they found empty cabinets. There were a minor few files, but all they held were blank white pages, and one with a single black page. Bouquet brought each page up to the bright light on the ceiling to see if she could see anything. This is strange. Does it have a riddle on it, Bucket? I can't read if it does. She moved it a bit more, trying to catch something showing through the thin page. This, while Scrape and Blur had moved to the desk and began moving things about there. Scrape reached for the lamp to see if it would move, and it did, only forward and backwards but there was a satisfying click, without it moving much from its spot. The room lights then shifted to a red color. Did that help? Did you do that? All Scrape could do was shrug in the now terrible lighting. Ah, there are some words on it. Well, what does it say, Bouquet? We don't have time to say, oh yes, there are words on it. The three of them looked expectantly at Bouquet as she read the words silently to herself. All could see that there was writing on there, but it was a jumbled up mess of lines and other weird things on it. Blur, when he realized she wasn't going to speak right away, turned to listen to the doorway they'd come through, just in case they were being followed by the robot. He, however, heard no sounds coming through. Okay, I think we need to go back to the office and the bedroom on the second floor. What for?
The numbers found there need to be plugged into the puzzle on this page. There were a couple of shoulders which sagged at this announcement. More running around was to be had. That's great and all, but our only way back right now is the way we came. I get the feeling we don't think going back that way is a good idea.
The sigh came from Cobra as she sat down on the edge of the desk. It did not hold her weight, though, and sent her to the ground in a jumbling mess. Though she did spring back up after a second. The others stared at the corner which had broken off. Sort of, but it hung there on a hinge. The far wall that acted as the back of the office then began sliding to the side to reveal a new doorway. I think we have found our way out. Thank you, Cobra. They moved through to this doorway that had opened for them and then closed once they were all through. Their rush and run slowed down to a slow, arduous crawl of a walk upon getting out. This was because they found themselves walking on glass. It felt like a thin material that might shatter with each step, so each was carefully, ever so carefully, moving along. Those that dared to look down would probably see the ballroom below them. If this is the glass ceiling, then what is above us? A retractable roof, maybe? Scrape looked over at Cobra and then up at the ceiling, which showed a metal structure with lots of beams and pieces, but maybe it looked like it could retract. He was not sure, though. Right, but one that has some sort of safety measure should anyone be up here and it is ordered open, right? I hope so, Scrape, since it would be terrible if it didn't. This was followed by the loud sound of something whirring, by the sound of a whining, whirring noise, and then a loud click, click, click. I know we are tired of running and this is a bad situation, but... The four all looked at the ceiling for only the briefest of moments of seconds before deciding it was in fact opening. They then began the tentative foot shuffle run across the glass. Blur, though, realized after a few seconds that he could just turn into a ball and was easily rolling across because it was a dome, though it wasn't exactly easy to stay on a straight course. The rest of them, though, kept up their walks, having made it halfway, with a slow, careful puffs of breath, waiting for the worst to happen. Noise from the roof was getting louder and louder, as it hissed and showed signs of being ready to separate. At that, the trio gave up and began running. The cracks of glass came with each step as they spread out a bit to avoid having to step over the same area as one another. The platform to the other side wasn't far away, with a heavy clanking noise from above, along with a hiss as they all held their breath. Coldness was filling this space as they arrived at the platform and found that there was a simple red button against the wall here. And when all of them had pressed it, it sent them rapidly downward. This little elevator rod dropped them off on the ballroom floor, and they were greeted by the robot as they stepped off. This little elevator platform then whisked all the way back upwards and settled into the glass ceiling, sealing it from any escape of oxygen. The robot, which appeared to be the same one as before, had already noticed them, but did not move at all. Do you think we can get past it? No, not with our luck. Are you talking about me? Yes, we are. Stand out of the way, we're busy, we have a case to solve and a murder to solve. No, I cannot do that, since my task is to remove those that wish harm upon the owner of this vessel. They all shared a look between one another, not buying this. We don't really want to harm Ebenezer, we never did. That is incorrect. I have recorded evidence of wrongdoing by all of you, and especially by one of you. Well, if you already know the answer, which one of us
did kill him. Yes, as Blur has pointed out, if you know who killed him, out with the evidence then. Help us wrap up this case at once so we can all go home. And why didn't you tell us this from the start, by the way? You've been chasing us around when we would have stopped and listened to you. The robot seemed to be grinding through a few gears in its circuit boards, trying to come up with an answer for Bouquet's question. It cocked its head to the side as it thought for this for a few moments. When Scrape did attempt to move past it, one of its big metal hands swung in his direction, stopping him from going any further. I cannot show you the evidence. Why? Is there something wrong with it? Do you not actually have proof that it is one of us? What is it that now is causing you to stop? My circuits are trying to figure that out, Miss Cobra. There appears to be some sort of block in my communication ability, but I still know that it was one of you, as my circuits tell me. There is no one else aboard this ship. Blur came a bit forward, trying to mold his blob-like shape into something that would look intimidating. The blue hue of gelatin mass never quite managed to get that look down, though. Then shouldn't that also include you? What do you mean, Mr. Blur? Blur, are you saying that the robot did it? It's within possibility. So far, in order for any of this to have happened, it would have to have been an inside job, setting everything up beforehand. What better way to do that than to reprogram something the weird rich man trusted? They were all studying the robot as it began ticking its head from side to side repeatedly. The motion was terribly fast and unnatural to look at. Are you okay? You seem a bit frazzled, Mr. Robot Creature Thing. The head tickings instantly came to a stop and stared right at Scrape. I have your answer as to who killed Mr. Ebenezer. They waited, half expecting the lights to suddenly go out and gunshots to follow. That or an answer from the machine, who stood there, not saying anything else. What are you doing? You have an answer. You could tell us. Apologies for the brief interlude. I had to make sure of some things, namely that the police are on the way. We already knew that. Ebenezer said he called them. Yes, well, that was a lie. That doesn't make us feel any better, but who do you think killed him? Well, Miss Bucket, Bouquet, Thingy, Creature, Person, it is a simple answer. It was all of you. End of Part 3 of The Murderous Yacht. Thank you for listening.